Hi, I'm Dahlia. They said they couldn't afford my tuition, said times were tight, money was low. But a week later, they booked a private trainer for my sister's dog. Obedience school, treats, even a photo shoot. At graduation, they sat in the front row smiling like they helped me get there. They didn't. They stole my college fund, paid for their image, and called it love. What kind of family replaces their daughter with a dog and still wants credit when she wins? Would you want to know what happened next? The envelope was thin, barely heavier than a grocery store receipt. It sat in the mailbox like it knew I'd been expecting it. When I slid my finger beneath the flap and pulled out the letter, there was no drama, no gasp. I'd already memorized the kind of language they used in these notices. Dear Ms. Penn, your account remains delinquent. Failure to remit payment within 14 days will result in automatic withdrawal. I folded the letter in half, then in half again, and walked it to the fridge. It joined a pizza coupon and a quote card that read, "You are the author of your own story." I pinned it there like it was a reminder, not a warning. I didn't cry, didn't cuss. I just stood there a minute longer than usual, letting the sound of the refrigerator fill the silence. The apartment was quiet, save for the occasional groan of the heating pipes. Outside, Lansing's January wind whipped around corners like it was in a rush to ruin something. Inside, I rubbed my thumb over the corner of the letter. One more semester, just one. I reached for my phone and dialed. Not out of hope, habit. Hello? Mom, I got a letter from financial aid, I said calmly, like I hadn't read it 6 times already. They're going to drop me if I don't pay the balance by the end of the month. I just need help covering this last bit. Her voice came bright, upbeat. Oh, honey, I wish we could. Things are a little tight right now. I waited. She continued. Actually, I'm on my way to drop Avon off for his obedience session. The trainer's booked solid. Had to reserve these 6 weeks in advance. I pulled the phone from my ear for a moment, looked at it, like maybe I misheard. But no. That was her tone, the one she saved for when I was being inconvenient. Got it, I said. Thanks anyway. You're strong, Dahlia. You always figure it out, she added, before hanging up like we'd been talking about my coffee order, not my future. I stared at the wall for a full minute. Then I went back to my tiny desk and opened my laptop. The tuition balance blinked at me from the screen. Unpaid. It wasn't the no that stung. I've heard that one before. It was the effortless way she said it, like she was brushing lint off her jacket, like I was an optional errand on her to-do list. Later that night, as the cold snuck in through the windowsill, I found myself thinking about other times I'd needed them. Like junior year, when I won the regional psychology essay competition and begged them to come to the reception. They said the traffic would be a nightmare. Or when I gave the opening remarks at the department scholarship dinner, and no one clapped louder than the girl's family sitting next to me. Because they were there. Mine weren't. I used to tell myself they were busy, that life just got in the way. But people make time for what matters. And that's the part that finally settled in. Maybe it was never about money. Maybe it was always about priorities. Avon, a Labrador with his own monogrammed collar and Instagram page, was easier to celebrate. He posed for pictures. He didn't talk back. I'd learned to pour myself into work. 2 part-time jobs. Night tutoring. Weekends spent grading freshman essays. I'd cut corners and missed sleep. But none of that ever showed up on their radar. I wasn't asking for a parade. Just a co-signer. Just a little belief. But apparently, that was reserved for dogs and daughters who didn't challenge the family narrative. When I pinned that notice to the fridge, I wasn't just making a reminder. I was marking something, a shift. It wasn't just that I was unsupported. It was that I'd been replaced, prioritized beneath a golden retriever's ability to sit on command. They didn't say it directly. They didn't have to. Their absence filled in the blanks. And as I sat in that cramped apartment, wrapping my scarf around me twice before stepping into the bitter Michigan wind, I whispered what felt like the truth out loud for the first time. I'm not their priority. And that changes everything. By the time the door closed behind me and I slipped my gloves off, the silence in the apartment felt different. Not peaceful, just final. I set my bag down, turned on the lamp, and sat at the edge of the couch like I wasn't quite ready to belong to the room again. My phone buzzed once, then again. I didn't recognize the name on the first alert, but the image told me everything. There, on my screen, was a golden retriever, Avon. His fur fluffed just right, tongue hanging out, flanked by Verena and a smiling man with a clipboard. Day 1 with Paul from Mindful Mutts. Avon is going to be such a gentleman. Sir Family First. I stared at it for a few seconds too long. The caption didn't even sting. It just clarified things. Tight on money, she'd said. Things are tight. It's funny how tight becomes fluid when it's about appearances. Later that week, I picked up an extra evening shift at Westmart, stocking shelves in the back. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I counted out packets of instant rice, trying not to let my thoughts spiral. Around 9:40, I moved toward the front to help with restocking batteries when the sliding doors opened. My body knew before my eyes confirmed it. Russell stepped in first, his coat a familiar navy blue, frayed at the cuffs. He looked relaxed. Verena followed, holding Avon on a short red leash, her laughter high and effortless. I ducked slightly behind the seasonal display and watched as they headed not toward my store, but across the street to Sit and Stay Elite. Through the large glass storefront, I saw it all. They talked to the boutique clerk, picked up a monogram treat pouch, and sampled grain-free dog chews. My mother paid in cash. My father held the door and carried the bag of goodies. I stood frozen, half hidden behind a display of half-off winter gloves. They didn't see me. That dog got more attention in 10 minutes than I had in the last year. I finished the shift without incident. Didn't mention it to my manager, didn't text anyone. I walked home slowly. The cold didn't bite anymore. It just sat on my skin like fog. Inside, I opened the fridge and stared at the letter I'd pinned up days ago. The paper had curled at the corners, like it was tired of being ignored. I touched it once, then turned away. My shoes squeaked against the kitchen tile, wet from snowmelt. The sole on the left one had split slightly. I made a mental note to add duct tape to tomorrow's shopping list. My phone buzzed again. Another notification, another story. Avon did so good with Stay. We're so proud. I blinked at the screen, locked it, set it face down. I'd pulled a 4.0 this semester, maintained 2 jobs, carried a senior thesis that was about to be published. But sure, let's clap for Stay. That night, I opened a blank document on my laptop, titled it, Just in Case They Ever Pretend This Didn't Happen. I started logging everything. January 11th, tuition hold letter. January 12th, call to Verena, denied support. January 13th, Avon's trainer appointment posted. January 14th, Verena seen purchasing treats at Sit and Stay. Screenshots, timestamps, quotes. It wasn't for pity, it was for protection. People like them, they rewrite history when it gets uncomfortable. But I would keep receipts. That's when I realized something else. This wasn't a case of being forgotten. They hadn't left me behind. They'd replaced me with something shinier, quieter, easier to clap for. And they did it publicly, smiling, proud. I didn't text back. I didn't call. I didn't even bother to correct the caption. They'd made their choice. So I made mine. It's not the first time I've been invisible. But this time, I started writing it down. I'd always been early to these things. Habit, maybe. Or some outdated sense of obligation I hadn't figured out how to shake yet. When I pulled into the driveway that Saturday, the house looked exactly the same. Fresh mulch by the mailbox, wind chimes clinking on the porch. Familiar, rehearsed. Inside, Verena was already in motion. She handed me a folded tablecloth without turning from the cupcakes she was arranging. Good, you're here. Can you start setting the dining table? I nodded. Of course I could. There was no small talk, no, how's school, or do you need anything? Just instructions. I'd stopped hoping for the other stuff years ago. By 1:15, I had laid out plates, straightened the chairs, and folded napkins into triangles. The candles were lit on the sideboard. The music was playing low from a Bluetooth speaker tucked behind the vase of fake peonies. I looked around the room like someone had hired me to stage it for a listing. Aunt Camille came in just before the first guest and scanned the room. "Oh, where's Dahlia?" she asked. Verena, without skipping a beat, pointed toward me by the kitchen pass-through. "She's been here since morning. Girl's great at keeping things moving." They all laughed. Even I did. Just to keep the room from freezing. I stayed in motion. That's what I was best at. Clearing glasses, replacing the appetizer tray, refilling napkins. One guest asked me if I worked for the catering company. By the time the cake was cut, I hadn't sat down once. I tried to make conversation with Russell while the kids ran outside and the music got louder. He looked at me, glanced down at his watch, and said, "Excuse me." Then he disappeared through the sliding door without explanation. 30 minutes passed. When he returned, he was holding 2 grocery bags, dish soap, bananas, a box of tissues. He'd gone shopping. During his own daughter's birthday party, no one said anything, not even Verena. And I didn't ask, because when someone disappears often enough, you stop noticing, you stop hoping, you stop saving them a seat. Later that evening, after most of the guests had gone and Callista was upstairs changing, Verena handed me a damp dish towel. "You're such a helper," she said, like I was 12. I dried the last of the plastic plates and looked toward the living room, where a few lingering relatives were scrolling through their phones. I wasn't in any of the pictures, not a single one. When I got back to my apartment that night, I opened Instagram. Callista had already posted a collage of the party, the guests, the decorations. So grateful for everyone who made today perfect. Everyone but me, apparently. I was the one holding the phone, taking the pictures. I didn't tag myself. I didn't comment. I didn't like the post. Instead, I opened my cloud storage and began deleting, one by one, photos of family barbecues, holidays, graduations. All the moments I used to think proved we were close. I stopped deleting after a dozen, not out of sentiment, but fatigue. It takes energy to hold on to things that don't hold you back. Before bed, I opened my private document and typed a new note. When I bring cupcakes, I'm called sweet. When I bring ideas, I'm called dramatic. I read it twice, saved it. Then I turned off my phone, brushed my teeth, and went to bed without saying goodnight to anyone. So I stopped bringing cupcakes. I didn't mention the party to anyone, not at work, not in class, not even to myself. I folded it up, pressed it between the pages of the unspoken, and went about my week like nothing had scraped loose inside me. Tuesday came with wind and deadlines. I was at my desk, eating microwaved soup between tutoring sessions, when the family group chat buzzed with a new photo. Callista's trainer says Avon might qualify for regionals, thinking about doing a professional photo shoot for him. Attached was a picture of the dog in a bow tie, perched on a mini couch, his ears perked as if he understood he was about to be famous. My spoon froze mid-air. Not a single message about my graduation, not a word about my final semester. Just a fluff piece about a dog preparing for a regional title like he'd applied for Harvard. I put the spoon down and locked my phone. I didn't delete the chat. I didn't respond. I just stopped pretending that I was even part of that room anymore. That night, I went into my calendar and erased my birthday. Not out of spite, just necessity. There was no point setting reminders for people who only showed up when it was convenient for them. By the end of the week, my routine had calcified into something sterile but dependable. Tutoring sessions from 7 a.m. to noon, print shop shifts from 4 p.m. to close, meals if I remembered, sleep in fragments. Most mornings, I ran on $2 coffee and silent grit. I'd passed the point of burnout. This was something else, pure function. Then I saw it. Callista posted another story. Brunch at a cafe downtown, all marble tables and lavender matcha. The caption, "Recovery Day with Avon's handler after his big week." I stared at the screen for a beat. She looked radiant. The dog, smug. And then there was the water bottle. Stainless steel, rose gold lid. The exact one I'd saved up to send her over Christmas. She'd mentioned it once in passing, not knowing I'd remembered. I'd ordered it anonymously. Let it arrive with a generic note. No fuss, no signature. Just something to say, I heard you. Now, the post read, "Thanks, Mom and Dad. Y'all always know what I like?" I scrolled past it. No anger, no heat. Just a click deeper into clarity. I almost texted Verena. "You knew that was from me." I typed it, sat with it, deleted it. Then I tried again. Never mind, I hope she enjoys it. Deleted that too. No message ever sent. Some things don't need to be corrected. They just need to be recorded. That night, I logged a new entry in my private file. Deck 20. Gift. $58.99. Plus tax. Recipient unknown. Praise redirected. I wasn't documenting pain anymore. I was building a pattern. Not for them. For me. There was no confusion now. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was precision. A pattern of erasure wrapped in civility. They didn't call me selfish. They just gave my gestures away to someone else and smiled about it. There's a type of betrayal that doesn't scream. It starves. So I stopped expecting them to clap. Stopped hoping they'd ask how my thesis was going. Stopped waiting for acknowledgement that never came. Instead, I made a new plan. Quiet. Simple. Ruthless in its resolve. Finish the semester. Pay what I had to. Do it alone. If love was measured in how often someone showed up, then they'd made their math clear. The last memory I shared with them, they gave to a dog. The first time I saw the canvas, it was on Callista's feed. I wasn't tagged, of course. But there it was. 4 smiling faces arranged like a catalog ad for Harmony. Verena, Russell, Callista, and Avon, seated dead center in a buttoned-up bow tie. Tongue out, tail slightly blurred like it had wagged through the shot. The caption read, "Family means everything." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, then zoomed in. Not out of denial, but out of compulsion. I scanned every inch for a corner of my shoulder, a reflection in a mirror, anything to suggest I'd been there. I hadn't. You don't forget to invite someone to a family photo. You choose not to. The post had over 100 likes. Comments included hearts, exclamation points, and one from Aunt Camille that read, "This belongs on a calendar." Apparently, it did. The next image was of the printed version, professionally stretched, gallery-wrapped, and hung above the fireplace. I found that out the following Saturday when I stopped by to return a box of my childhood books I'd used for research. I rang the bell. Verena opened the door, her face a mask of surprised warmth. "Well, look who's here," she said, her voice lilting like I'd just popped in from down the street, and not from a life she hadn't checked on in weeks. "I'm just dropping these off," I said, lifting the box slightly. "Didn't want them getting lost when the house eventually gets redone." "Oh, how thoughtful. You always were the practical one." She stepped aside. I crossed the threshold like a visitor. And there it was. The canvas, centered above the mantel. Spotlit, framed by 2 tall vases of artificial lilies. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Verena glanced over and smiled. "You should take more pictures, honey. That way you won't feel left out." My mouth opened slightly, then closed. I looked at the photo again, then at her. I set the box down near the entryway and turned back toward the door. "Thanks for the reminder," I said as I walked out. That night, I didn't cry. Instead, I scrolled through my private folder, opened the log, and added, Feb 2, canvas, 4 faces, mine not one of them, fireplace confirmed. A few hours later, I made the mistake of checking Callista's TikTok. The music caught me first. Dream a Little Dream of Me. A scratchy recording. The same arrangement I'd sung at my 3rd grade recital. The one Verena swore brought her to tears. But this wasn't me. It was Callista, lip-syncing while holding Avon like a prop. Her caption, "This one's the real star of the family." Followed by hashtags I didn't bother reading. I clicked replay once, not because I needed confirmation, but because something in me wanted to make sure I wasn't exaggerating. I wasn't. They'd taken my childhood memory, my voice, and stitched it to a joke for likes. I didn't comment. I didn't message her. I simply took a screenshot, copied the link, and dropped it into my document under a new heading. Feb 2, Song Use, Personal Archive, Public Repurposing without context or credit. I whispered aloud to the empty room. I'm not invisible. They just gave my spotlight to a dog in a sweater. And that was the moment I made my last internal shift. No more hoping. No more guessing. If I wasn't going to be seen, I wouldn't be available either. I deleted myself from the shared family calendar, removed every holiday, every birthday, every event that wasn't mine. Then I opened the family chat thread, scrolled to the top, and muted it indefinitely. I created a new folder on my laptop, Graduation Solo. Inside, I dropped a single note, reserved, no guests. They posted their version of family. Now I'll build mine. In silence. 3 weeks before graduation, I stepped into the financial aid office for what I thought would be a routine follow-up. It was late afternoon. The waiting area was half empty, quiet in that stale, overheated way that made you second-guess even being there. Jennifer, the same admin who'd processed my previous appeal, greeted me with a tight smile and handed over a printout. "I wish I had better news," she said, her voice low. I scanned the document. Application for institutional hardship grant denied. Missing parental verification. I blinked at the page. "What do you mean missing? I submitted everything, twice." She looked around, leaned slightly closer. "They filed a new income declaration. It contradicts yours. They reported a higher bracket and checked the box saying you no longer qualify as a dependent." A pause stretched between us. "So I'm just out?" "I'm sorry," she said. And I think she meant it. "I really am." I left without speaking another word. My boots hit the sidewalk hard. The cold didn't sting anymore. It just settled in like bad news that wouldn't leave your chest. Outside, I whispered to no one. They didn't forget me. They disqualified me. That night, I sat cross-legged on my bed and updated the file. Feb 7. Evidence of income sabotage. Contact, Jennifer, Office of Financial Aid. PDF copies stored. I wasn't even angry, not in the way most people imagine it. There's a flavor of betrayal that burns so clean it almost feels sterile. I sent one message, to Professor Holloway. "Can I reserve one of the seminar rooms for quiet work? Just need somewhere uninterrupted." She replied in less than 10 minutes. "Room 204 is yours through finals. You don't owe me an explanation. You just keep doing what you're doing." No, "How are you?" No, "What happened?" And I appreciated that more than I could say. The next morning, I pulled a box from the back of my closet, one I hadn't opened in years. It held old birthday cards, church bulletins with my name on the program, a letter from Verena that once said, "We believe in you, but be realistic." I didn't read the rest. I took the contents outside, lit them in a metal bowl on the fire escape, and watched them curl, blacken, and rise. When it cooled, I scooped the ashes into a mason jar. On the lid, I wrote in permanent marker, "Evidence of who they wanted me to be." That same day, I transferred the remaining balance of my tuition from my savings. The screen blinked for a moment, then gave me the final confirmation. Tuition paid, spring semester complete. There were no congratulations, no clapping. Just a silent, cold room and the sound of the fridge humming behind me. I sat down with a plastic bowl of leftover pasta and turned off the overhead light. No TV, no music. Just me, the dark, and a sense of clarity that didn't feel empowering, just necessary. I whispered to the dark, not because I needed someone to hear me, but because I wanted to hear it myself. It's not the money, it's the math. I was worth less than the lie. They'd done more than step away. They'd taken me out of the equation. If I wasn't in the family, then they shouldn't be in my future. The next morning, I checked my email out of habit. That's when I saw it. "You've been tagged in a post." Not directly, of course. Someone I hadn't spoken to since high school forwarded a screenshot. There, Under a glowing article from the local community page was Callista's face, smiling under a headline that read, "Meet Callista Rhodes, dog advocate, future vet tech, and hometown inspiration." The write-up described her as a young woman raised in a deeply supportive household who used pet therapy and social engagement to make the world better, one paw at a time. It was glossy, warm, completely made up. At the bottom, the Rhodes family, love, discipline, and the power of positivity. My stomach didn't drop. My fist didn't clench. I didn't feel heat rise into my face. What I felt was clarity, cold and even. They weren't just putting her on a pedestal, they were writing me out of the frame entirely. I opened my file, the one I'd quietly built over weeks, screenshots, financial statements, emails, silent timestamps of erasure, and I created a new entry. Feb 14, public misrepresentation, community article, archive link plus screenshots, not for revenge, for insurance. They were building a version of us that sold well in public, and I refused to let it stand unchallenged. Not in truth, at least. That same afternoon, an alumni newsletter landed in my inbox. At first, I thought it was another invitation to ignore. But then I saw it. Callista's name, bolded, listed under the upcoming local youth role model nominations. The blurb credited her for family-centered pet care programs and listed Russell and Verena as co-hosts of the upcoming fundraising gala. I looked at the date, Saturday, 7 p.m. I picked up a marker and wrote on my wall calendar, Silent War, 7 p.m. They were preparing to be celebrated. I was preparing to be remembered, accurately. That night, I opened my old budget spreadsheet and read the notes I'd left behind when I was scrambling to pay tuition. One entry caught my eye. I had written it in a rush after leaving the aid office. They gave a dog a future. They gave me paperwork. I didn't delete it. I added to it. And now they want applause for that trade. Then, I logged out of every personal social media account. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I didn't deactivate, I erased. Not because I was hiding, but because they only knew how to reach the version of me they created. The real me had left the building. I didn't announce it. I didn't make a dramatic farewell post. I simply disappeared from their radar. Next, I opened my contacts list. One by one, I removed every family member. No text message. No, I'm done. I set my phone on Do Not Disturb. Adjusted my email filters so nothing from a Rhodes domain hit my main inbox. Then I opened a blank Word doc, just to see what I might say if I ever did write something back. I typed, "You made the world believe you raised someone great. You just never expected her to remember the truth." I didn't send it. I didn't even save it. I closed the laptop, leaned back, and let the silence settle in. If they loved their image so much, let them sit front row for what it cost them. Graduation day started colder than I expected. There was a crispness in the air that didn't match the photos people posted about spring ceremonies, where flowers bloomed and families posed under sunny skies. This wasn't that. This was Michigan in March, gray, honest, and unapologetic. I arrived early, not because I wanted to beat traffic or take photos, but because I needed to see the seats, 2 in the front row. Reserved. No names. I'd requested it weeks ago through the dean's office. Quietly, carefully. The assistant looked confused, but didn't question it. "Should I leave them blank?" she'd asked. "Exactly that," I said. Now, standing in the auditorium before the crowd arrived, I looked at those chairs. They sat like unfinished sentences, waiting to be filled by people who no longer knew how to read what I'd become. And they would come. That I was sure of. They couldn't resist the photo op. Verena loved events that required little emotional investment, but offered great visibility. Russell wouldn't miss a chance to be seen clapping in the front row, suit freshly pressed, pretending he'd been there all along. I stared at those seats for a moment longer, then turned toward the back hallway leading to the green room. Inside, it was chaos. Gowns rustling, tassels being flipped, people triple-checking that their names were spelled right on the slide deck. I slipped through them like I didn't belong, like I was watching someone else's celebration. In a corner near the curtain, I sat alone. I could hear my name being said, lightly, casually. "She made it," a woman's voice said from the crowd. Verina's. "Our girl made it." But it was too rehearsed, too polished. She probably practiced it in the car on the way over. My hand rested on the inside pocket of my gown. I could feel the folded edges of my speech, worn slightly from weeks of being reread, edited, lived. "You made me, sure. But not like you think." The dean stepped forward onto the stage. His voice filled the space like it belonged there. "This year's top graduate," he said, "is someone who has shown us the meaning of persistence, intellect, and quiet strength. Please join me in congratulating Dahlia Penn." Applause. Real and thunderous. I stepped out into the lights. I didn't scan the crowd for them. I already knew where they were sitting, right where they always wanted to be, visible. I walked to the mic with steady feet, no smile, no shaking. Just a calm I hadn't known I could carry this far. "I didn't get here alone," I began. Pause. "I got here because people saw me when it was easier to look away. Professors who stayed after hours. A librarian who always kept the back table open for me. A classmate who gave me a ride when the bus line cut service. And donors who gave anonymously, without demanding gratitude or attention." I saw the heads turn slightly. They were waiting for the mention. The nod. The family. I let the silence hold. "They said we couldn't afford my education," I continued, "but managed a trainer for our dog. They said I was being dramatic, but I say education isn't a luxury, it's a right. And I claimed mine, without them." The room froze for half a beat. Then applause broke open like thunder cracking a too-still sky. I stepped back from the mic, bowed once, sharply, and walked off. No bowing toward the front row, no polite nods. As I passed the side aisle, I saw Russell halfway out of his chair, hand twitching like he might say something. Verena mouthed something too. "We love you," maybe, or something she thought would land safely in public. I didn't stop. I kept walking. They came for a performance. I gave them a verdict. The hallway behind the auditorium was cooler, quieter, like someone had shut the world off just long enough for me to breathe. I leaned against the wall, hands still damp from nerves I didn't let show. The clapping had stopped, but something heavier lingered in the silence. Sarah, my lab partner, and the closest thing I had to a friend on campus, ducked behind the curtain and spotted me. Her smile was wide, a little stunned. "That was savage," she whispered, half laughing. "I mean, in the best way." I didn't respond, just gave her a nod and a half-hearted smile. That was enough. I didn't go to the reception line, didn't want hugs from classmates who barely remembered my name. I slipped out a side door and took the long way around toward the small room set up for graduates to store their things. Halfway there, I saw them. Russell and Verena. They were standing just inside the open reception space, both holding those little paper flutes of champagne they only ever touched for the photo. Russell had that blank look he used when trying to calculate his next move. Verena's smile was pinned in place, like it had forgotten how to be real. When she saw me, she brightened, or tried to. "Sweetheart," she said, stepping forward. "We were here. That has to count for something, doesn't it?" I didn't answer right away. I reached into the pocket of my coat and pulled out a white envelope. "This is the bill," I said calmly, handing it to her. "The one you didn't cover, paid in full. Not by you. Never needed you." Her hand closed around it like it burned. Russell opened his mouth slightly, then shut it. There was no shouting, no dramatic storming off. Just three people standing too close together with absolutely nothing left to say. I walked away before they could respond. Inside the smaller lounge, one of my professors, Dr. Franklin from senior seminar, found me sipping warm water from a paper cup. "You handled yourself with real grace today," she said, her voice gentle. "The board asked me to let you know. We'd like to feature you in the next alumni magazine as one of our voices of strength, Something in my chest loosened. I nodded. That would be fine. I didn't say much more. I didn't have to. Out in the reception hall, I heard someone laugh too loudly. It was Callista. I recognized her voice even before the sound registered. Later that night, someone sent me a screenshot of her Instagram post. "So proud of my sister," it said. "She's always been dramatic, but brilliant." The comments were a mix of polite praise and curiosity. One, though, stood out. "Was this the speech where she didn't mention y'all at all?" The post was gone within the hour. I walked home alone. The air had turned sharper, and the sky was the kind of dark that doesn't bother with stars. My feet ached, but it was a satisfying kind of pain. Earned. Honest. At my apartment, I didn't change. I didn't even sit down. I opened my laptop, uploaded the video of my speech to my private YouTube account, and typed the caption, "For those who ever felt invisible." Then I hit publish. I didn't text anyone about it. I didn't post it anywhere else. That wasn't the point. They'd been counting on me to leave a spot open for them in the story. But I hadn't. I didn't even leave them a seat. They chose who to invest in. Now they're watching the return on someone else's work. The email came mid-morning, tucked between a bank notification and a promotion for half-price air fryers. I nearly deleted it without reading, but then I saw the name, Mrs. Kim. "Sweetheart," her voicemail began, her tone unsure. "I saw a for sale sign on your parents' lawn yesterday. I didn't want to assume, but I just thought you should know. Are they okay?" I didn't call back. Instead, I opened my laptop, clicked over to the county records site, and typed in the address I used to call home. There it was. Active listing. 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Recent price drop. No photos of the living room wall. No trace of the canvas. 1 week after graduation, I sat across from my attorney in a conference room that smelled faintly of paper and peppermint tea. "Congratulations," she said, sliding the stamped court order across the table. The ruling was clear. Unauthorized withdrawal of educational funds. Breach of fiduciary duty. "They overrode your trust assignment," she said. "Signed forms as if they had your consent, then rerouted the money to pay off personal expenses, including, it seems, a professional pet training company." I didn't flinch. I'd already read the invoices. The judge ordered repayment of the full amount, plus damages. Legal fees, too. "They didn't just bet on the wrong person," my attorney added, packing up her files. "They stole from the right one." That afternoon, I updated the last line in my archive file. Not out of anger, out of record-keeping. Verdict rendered, justice written. I closed the file. I didn't open it again. It didn't take long for the other shoe to drop. By Thursday, a story surfaced on a neighborhood blog. Avon had bitten a toddler during a therapy dog visit at a private daycare. The headline asked, "How far will families go to protect their image?" The comments weren't kind. By Friday, Callista's sponsorship with a major pet brand quietly disappeared from her social media bio. Verina's blog was taken offline for a family hiatus. Russell's name no longer appeared on the website of the consulting firm, where he'd once bragged he was irreplaceable. I didn't comment. I didn't forward links. I just sat in my apartment and made coffee. They were unraveling, not from a single blow, but from the slow erosion of lies that had nowhere else to land. The truth didn't need to scream. It just needed to outlast their version of the story. Messages trickled in. A cousin I hadn't heard from in years sent, "I'm sorry, I didn't know it was that bad." A girl from my high school choir wrote, "We were wrong. You deserved better." I read each one without response. I wasn't collecting apologies. I was protecting my peace. On Sunday, I walked 3 blocks to a second-hand appliance store and bought myself an espresso machine. Not fancy, slightly scratched, but it worked. When I set it up by the window, I poured the first cup and whispered, "To settlements that buy silence and coffee that speaks louder." I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. I didn't need them to fall. I just needed them to stop pretending they'd held me up. They were losing what they thought made them important. I had stopped needing them to see me at all. Forgiveness is optional. Boundaries are not. 2 weeks after the verdict, a small box appeared outside my door. No return address, no note, just taped edges and a familiar script on the shipping label. Inside, nestled between crumpled tissue paper, was the silver locket I wore every day in 4th grade, and a folded photograph. Me, at 8 years old, sitting cross-legged on the back porch, Avon curled up beside me, like a shadow that chose to stay. I didn't open the locket, didn't flip the photo over to see if someone had scrawled a memory on the back. I just stared. When someone finally sends you something real, but it's 20 years late, it doesn't land, it echoes. That same afternoon, Verina's name appeared in my inbox. The subject line was 2 words, "Let's talk." The body of the email was longer than I expected. "We know we messed up. Can we talk? Maybe we can start again. We'll come to you. Just tell us when." I closed the message. I didn't delete it. But I didn't reply either. Instead, I texted Professor Holloway. "Coffee?" She answered in less than 5 minutes. "Of course. The little place on Carson?" We met the next day. No fanfare, no awkward small talk. Just 2 mugs, 1 cracked saucer, and a corner booth that didn't demand explanations. "You look tired," she said. "I am." We sipped in silence for a while. She finally set her cup down and folded her hands. "You don't owe them anything, Dahlia. Not even closure." "I keep wondering if I'll regret not giving them a second chance," I said. She tilted her head. "You already gave them the first 50. I laughed. For the first time in weeks, it didn't feel forced. "You've crossed the fire," she said, softer now. "They just weren't there to watch." I took a deep breath, one that reached all the way down. Later that night, I stood in front of the gallery wall in my apartment. Photos of science fairs, scholarship dinners, award ceremonies, all with one thing in common: empty chairs where parents should have been. I took them down, one by one. In their place, I hung Polaroids from study nights, laughing over bad takeout, notes passed in class, photos with lab mates holding coffee cups and whiteboards. I added a printed card in the center. Sometimes the ones who clapped the softest were the ones who saved your life. I stood back. Let it settle. That night, I journaled for the first time in a long while. I'm not angry anymore, but I won't make space for their remorse. If I ever have a daughter, I'll teach her that some applause comes too late, and that's not her fault. I didn't check my phone until morning. Callista had sent a message overnight. "I didn't know what they did with your college fund. I didn't mean to take anything from you. I just didn't know." It was short, foggy, like someone trying to clean a window from the inside without opening it first. I marked it as read, archived it. I didn't feel better, just clearer. Not every boundary needs a speech. Some are just decisions you keep making, day after day, until they become the shape of your life. I don't hate them, but they don't get to follow me where I'm going next. I caught the 9:10 a.m. train out of the city on a Thursday. The platform was half empty, quiet enough that I could hear my own breathing between station announcements. I carried 2 bags, one with my laptop, thesis binder, and a few clothes. The other, smaller, held my espresso machine and a photo of me and Professor Holloway in front of the lab whiteboard, both of us smiling like the world had just let us win something. The train rolled forward slow and steady. I didn't look back through the window. I didn't need to. It had been 3 weeks since the court ruling, 2 since the box with the locket, 1 since I finally shut the last folder tied to my family's name. I stared out at the passing trees, watching as the skyline turned rural. Then rural became unfamiliar. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I pulled it out without thinking. It was an auto-forwarded message from an old inbox I'd forgotten to disable. Subject: Mortgage fulfillment, transfer confirmed. The body was short. The home had sold. The proceeds had been used to settle an undisclosed legal debt. Attached was the routing history, a final payment that matched the judgment total, to the dollar. I tapped once, marked it read, and let it slide away. They erased me from their legacy. Now they have to live in what's left of it. The train slid into my new city just past noon. I exited with the rest of the crowd, but didn't feel like part of it. Not yet. At the curb, a driver held a placard with my name, Dr. Dahlia Penn, typed cleanly in black. I hadn't asked them to add the honorific, but it sat nicely there, like a nameplate I hadn't been allowed to claim until now. The ride to the Institute's housing was uneventful. Trees, brick buildings, the occasional crossing sign. It felt like a town I could grow into. My apartment was on the 3rd floor. Neutral walls, polished hardwood, a small balcony that looked out over a dog park. Of all things. I unpacked slowly. Just the essentials. A few books. Notebooks. A framed quote for my thesis dedication. Work toward what lasts longer than applause. In the kitchen, I set up the espresso machine on the counter beneath the window. It hissed and sputtered, but worked just fine. There was a folder waiting on the desk, welcome materials from the research team. Inside was a handwritten note from the program director. We're proud to have someone who knows how to work for what matters. We don't hand things out, we notice who earns them. I folded the note once and placed it beside the coffee mug. I didn't smile for anyone, but I smiled. That evening, I sat on the balcony with my first real cup of quiet in months. No phone, no emails, no echo of someone else's version of who I was. Just a woman who had survived being rewritten and decided to write herself whole. I don't want revenge. I want distance. And I have that now. No press interview, no dramatic exit speech. Just clean boundaries, paid bills, and a name they don't get to touch. They taught me the cost of being unseen. I turned that cost into currency and started over.